Okay. Well, welcome everyone to our traditional ICAP World AIDS Day event. I want to welcome you all here today. I'm going to start by a brief introduction and tell you a little bit about what we're going to be doing today on this date. First of all, let me introduce myself. I'm Wafa El-Sadr. I'm the director of ICAP, a global health center that's based right here at the Columbia Mailman School of Public Health. And I'm also executive vice president of Columbia Global. I want to thank the people who are joining us today in this auditorium. Thank you for being here in person. I also want to thank as well the individuals around the world who've joined us today virtually. We welcome you all to our World Days event. Of course, World Day event usually takes place on December 1, which is the traditional day when it's celebrated. But since it fell on Sunday, we are celebrating today this event today. Before I say a few words about the program itself, I'm delighted that we have today with us Dr. Linda Fried, who's the Dean of the Mailman School of Public Health, and I'll ask her to come up and please give us a few words of welcome. Linda, please welcome.
You, Wafa, and it's my real privilege to join you in welcoming everybody here today, and to thank you for your dedication to the issues we're talking about today and to being part of this annual event, which is always informative and absolutely reinforcing of inspiration. Every year, when ICAP commemorates World AIDS Day, whether it's on the exact day or not, it's a reminder of the amazing work that is performed by this very unique global health center and center of leaders. For more than 2 decades now, ICAP has taken on the most complex health threats in some of the most challenging contexts on Earth. And foremost among those challenges, I think, has been how to enact impactfully its unflagging commitment to helping resource-challenged regions and countries make sustainable progress toward not just controlling HIV, but to ending the pandemic. Relentlessly innovative from the ground up and the top down, ICAP has built models that were never before seen and taken them to scale, to impact that's never before been seen. And through that, I think ICAP in unprecedented ways, and by ICAP I mean all of you and all of us, ICAP has really reached not just millions of lives, but been a transformative factor in the global response to this devastating disease and to the absolute progress in containing it. Apropos of today's theme, ICAP has been a true champion of women, working tirelessly for health equity, for the opportunity for health equity, helping women overcome stigma and gender-based violence, and empowering women and girls living with HIV and those at risk for HIV to take charge and change their futures. And unsaid in that, but should not be unsaid, and unrecognized in that, and should not be unrecognized, is that it's women leaders, the women leaders to tackle and solve HIV, have provided enduring, transformational leadership and impact, which we will be seeing some of today. So my thanks go to all of my colleagues who have been among that group. And now I'll hand it back to you, Wafa, for what I know will be a fascinating film screening and a great program. And congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you very much, Linda. It's great to have you here with us. And the people standing in the back, we have seats up front, so please just feel free to walk down and just take a seat. Okay, so World AIDS Day is a yearly opportunity to gather and to do two very important things. World AIDS Day gives us an occasion to celebrate the remarkable gains that have been made over the past 3 decades. The advances made in confronting the pandemic in our own country, as well as in many countries around the world, really represent one of the greatest public health achievements of this century or last century, of our generation. Thanks to the research, thanks to the partnerships, the scale up of prevention and treatment, and the dedication of countless people, we have seen HIV transformed from what once was a death sentence to now a chronic manageable condition. And we've also seen the lives of individuals, families, communities, and countries transformed in the process. At the same time, World AIDS Day, for me and for all of us, is an annual reminder there's so much more work that needs to be done. Today, some 40 million people are living with HIV around the world, and millions have yet to access life-saving treatment, actually close to 10 million people. We have had an estimated 1.3 million individuals who newly acquired HIV just in the past year, and close to 30,000 in our own country here in the United States. And just last year alone, there were 630,000 individuals around the world who died from HIV-related illnesses. So as you can see, this struggle continues and must continue. And also, as you can see, many of us joining this event today are committed to seeing this epidemic to its end. So the theme for World AIDS Day, every year there's a theme. UNAIDS identifies this theme for World AIDS Day. And the theme this year is collective action, sustain and accelerate HIV progress. Collective action means collaboration, coordination, partnerships, innovation, determination, and justice. Call it what you will, working together is the key to controlling HIV and finally realizing a world without AIDS as a public health threat. And today, we shine a light on a major ingredient in this collective action, and that's the role of women. When AIDS first appeared as one of the major global health threats in our generation, it was mostly noted amongst men. But over time, and not without a struggle, as you learn today, it became evident that women have been just as affected. And as we consider the ways that addressing HIV amongst women and girls figures into the overall strategy for solving the HIV challenge, we also must pay close attention to the role women have played as leaders in the efforts to address the epidemic here in the US and around the globe. These women have been researchers, activists, policymakers, community leaders, doctors, nurses, mentors, educators, social workers, planners, and of course, documentarians. And we have one of them here with us today. For the achievements we recognize in the HIV response today, and those that we dedicate ourselves to do in the future, we have many women to thank for the progress we have made. Now we're about to see excerpts from an extraordinary documentary that vividly captures exactly what I was just telling you, the contributions of women in the HIV response. This film is entitled Nothing Without Us, The Women Who Will End AIDS. Due to the time constraints, unfortunately, we can't see the whole film, but nonetheless, we've selected some segments that we will show now, and then thereafter, we will have a conversation and a discussion. And after this event, we will actually send to all of you the link to the full film so that you can enjoy the full documentary later on. So let's move on with the documentary.
Scientists at the National Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta today released the results of a study which shows that the lifestyle of some male homosexuals has triggered an epidemic of a rare form of cancer.
The scientists say they are dealing with some new deadly sexually transmitted disease.
perception early on was that it was a disease that was only affecting gay white men, which was completely and totally inaccurate.
Women were dying faster. Women were sick and still being ostracized and isolated without the benefit of women-specific resources and support.
There was a saying kind of in the early days of the epidemic, women don't get AIDS, we just die from it. That perception continues to be true.
The people who could afford drugs were getting them from Europe and from the US, and it was just ridiculously expensive.
I think because the impact of how this epidemic has hit certain particular groups that are considered
You call it racism?
outcasts. Racism, classism, sexism, you name it, any of the isms that you could think of.
Mon expérience est partie des femmes. Je me suis battue parce que ma révolte a été la révolte d'une mère.
Change your definition, murder by omission. Change your definition, murder by omission.
Well, the average person who goes to church believes that they're exempt from HIV. They think they can pray it away. And I am a living testimony that prayer doesn't stop you from becoming infected.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We are fighting for our lives. 6, 7, 8.
In this country, we're almost 30% of this epidemic. Worldwide, we're 50% of the epidemic. Maybe a little more. Yet, what you hear about women is almost zero.
For everything that the men have done to forge the fight on this epidemic, to open the door, it will be the women who close the door on this epidemic. I am not confused about that at all.
I'm here because I'm an ex-prisoner, and I'm also HIV infected, and I learned that status while being confined. And because I want adequate health care for prisoners that I left there, I don't want them harassed or isolated as a result of that. I want them to let out terminally ill individuals, because that's like double jeopardy, and it becomes a death sentence for those individuals. And if they pose no threat to society, let them out and let them die in dignity in hospice or in community that they belong to.
If you ask me in my whole life who are the kind of biggest mentors that I've had, one would be for sure Katrina Haslip. She had been incarcerated at Bedford Hills, which is a women's prison upstate. She not only taught herself the law and became a jailhouse lawyer, she knew all about criminal law. She knew how to file appeals to shorten people's sentences. She knew all there was to know about HIV and policy. So she was an incredible leader at Bedford Hills.
I am affected by this epidemic either as a person with HIV or loving someone who's HIV. So we all are living with it. And I said, well, I'm living with it from another perspective as an infected individual. And people's mouths like dropped, because I guess they see me as this Muslim, they see me as, this girl who jogs in the yard all the time, I was the law library clerk, so no, I was straight, so how did she get infected,
There was a freak out in here. There was fear that was very volatile, lots of rumors. And more women were coming into the facility with fear. I mean, I think that in those years, that's when everyone said, oh my God, I'm going to prison, I'm going to catch AIDS.
Women were afraid to go and seek help or go and even get tested, because what were you going to do when you found out? And if you went to get tested, then maybe nobody would speak to you.
We knew very little about AIDS. We knew that we would need education from outside resources, and we knew that we would need training ourselves in order to help the PWAs. As a result of that, we were doing counseling, like one-on-one, informally, in the yard, in the shower, wherever, people ask questions.
But that is not the only reason people.
And what about somebody that's HIV positive and they want to go to somebody in isolation that may have cancer or something else?
They've created a group called ACE, AIDS Counseling and Education. It's a very emotional time. We didn't only deal with the women who had HIV, we had to deal with family members. Women were losing family members right and left.
We began to link PWAs up with buddies who would go up to the hospital and see them, who would do their shopping or clean up their cells or help them in the shower or take them out for recreation. And we noticed that it was changing the community, that we seen ourselves as a community. And we were very hyped about it because we felt like we were a community that was invisible, that no one thought could help themselves, and yet we were doing it.
I didn't think she was going to make it past a month when she was so sick.
ACE gave her what she needed, which was a vision of the rest of her life. She had that idea of, I'm going to get out because I have to get out and I have to be a voice for changing the way that the public sees the AIDS epidemic.
I represent the excluded and underrepresented groups of women, minorities, and HIV-positive individuals, and also prisoners, of which I am a member of all of the above. It is important to us that we educate ourselves, that we learn what treatments are available and how effective they are, and that we be given unlimited access to them.
It seemed obvious to us that we were in the middle of an epidemic that had to do with women and children. And so that was kind of our push, and in particular, it was Katrina's push. She said her first goal when she got out was to change the CDC definition of AIDS. And she went out there and she talked to people in the movement about it. I think she helped them prioritize that change. She fired up women who had been active in the movement, but helping their brothers to realize that they had sisters in the epidemic.
Katrina, more than anybody, is the one first raised these issues in a policy context. I first met Katrina on October 1st, which was 1990. Somebody pulled me over and said, I know you've been waiting to meet Katrina Haslip. This is Katrina. And Katrina laughed and said she was on parole. She wasn't supposed to be here. And of course, then promptly joined the demonstration. It was shocking to see these women so ill and unable to qualify for anything.
Name is Iris Dela Cruz. I'm a 37-year-old woman with AIDS.
What happens is you actually get their medical records, and I kept seeing this HIV positive but not AIDS all over their records.
Lydia Awadallah lost her husband to AIDS 6 years ago and her youngest son last summer. But Lydia herself did not meet the government definition of an AIDS patient because
basically this definition, which was linked to all these automatic, eligibility for benefits, Medicaid, medication, housing, that it was based on studies of men.
We're suing Louis Sullivan. Basically, we're saying that Social Security is irresponsible to use the CDC definition of AIDS because the CDC is discriminatory in how it's gone about its studies. It hasn't studied poor people, it hasn't studied women, it hasn't studied people in urban areas sufficiently, and that's costing lives.
It takes 1 to 3 years to get benefits for these women. That's with an attorney. I lost 3 clients before I could get them benefits. These are women who have children who are HIV infected, who can't afford to take care of themselves or their children. Their list of what is AIDS is based on gay white men.
Je suis née au Burundi et particulièrement à Bujumbura, la capitale. On était 8. Il y a 5 qui sont décédés, 4 garçons et une fille. Et parmi les 5 qui sont décédés, il y a 2 qui sont décédés par le VIH. À 21 ans, je me marie. Je me suis mariée avec un homme que j'aimais, qui m'aimait. Et donc, on avait eu la chance d'avoir un beau bébé. C'était un petit garçon qui s'appelait Guy Bertrand. Qui avait évolué très très bien, mais c'est seulement à 6 mois qu'il a commencé à être malade. Et je me rappelle, le médecin me dit, il faudra venir, mais venez avec ton mari. Et nous sommes allés le voir. Il l'a sorti vraiment d'une façon brutale. Votre bébé a le sida, donc il doit mourir, et vous aussi. Et directement, je lui ai dit, mais je suis enceinte. Il dit, mais il n'y a pas à se questionner, il faut tout simplement avorter. Ce qu'il a dit après, vous allez mourir aussi. Moi, ça ne me disait rien du tout, parce que d'abord, je ne voyais pas comment je pouvais survivre sans mon bébé. Mon souci, c'était de pouvoir l'assister jusqu'à son dernier souffle, quitte à mourir après. C'était la période où, en fait, à l'hôpital, on n'acceptait pas. Dès qu'on voyait que vous êtes infecté, on trouvait que vous occupez une place pour rien. Donc, on vous renvoyait à la maison. Ça a été le cas pour mon bébé, ça a été le cas pour mon mari, ça a été le cas pour ma sœur, ça a été le cas pour mon frère. Je n'avais aucun souci de santé, en fait, c'est juste faire cet avortement. Quand j'ai quitté la salle d'opération, on m'a amenée en croyant que bon, on a enlevé juste le bébé. Et 3 mois après, je n'ai pas de règles. Je me dis, c'est peut-être une complication. Je retourne la voir. Il me dit, mais oh, j'ai oublié de te dire, j'ai enlevé le matrice. Je pense qu'elle a décidé que je n'avais pas besoin. Elle a décidé seule. Et en 1er décembre 1994, je vais à la messe parce qu'on disait c'est la journée internationale contre le sida et c'est le jour où on prie pour les morts du sida. Et le prêtre a commencé alors son homélie. Ceux qui sont morts du sida, c'était des pécheurs. Ils ont été punis par Dieu. Je n'avais pas encore terminé mon deuil. Et malgré que j'avais perdu et ma sœur, et mon frère, et mon mari, ce qui m'a révoltée, ça a été qu'on vient de condamner mon bébé. Et donc, je vais devant, je dis, je viens de perdre un enfant. Moi-même, je vis avec le VIH. Et je ne pense pas que dans cette salle, dans cette église, il y a un saint. Dans l'église, il y avait pas mal d'autres personnes comme moi qui étaient frustrées mais qui ne parvenaient pas à parler et qui sont venues me rejoindre en me disant « on ne va pas s'arrêter là ». Et c'était le début de la lutte au niveau national. Si rien n'est fait, on va mourir. Et c'est exactement ce qui va se passer. On va mourir, mais il y a des gens qui sont déjà morts pendant les 3 mois. Et ça, je pense que c'est inacceptable. C'est un droit élémentaire et nous exigeons qu'une solution soit trouvée et dans l'immédiat. En 1993, c'était l'année où il y avait la guerre au Burundi. Et c'était tellement de problèmes que le sida n'était pas un problème pour les décideurs. Le sida tuait plus même que la guerre. Mais comme il tuait sans faire du bruit, personne s'en occupait. Et le Burundi était frappé d'embargo économique. Et ce qui faisait qu'il n'y avait pas de traitement du tout, de traitement au Burundi. Et les gens mouraient vraiment comme des mouches.
Vous voyez, il est paralysé déjà.
Il n'y avait aucun flacon dans le Burundi. Je faisais des navettes pour aller chercher les médicaments, le fluconazole au Rwanda. Alors là, tout le monde a déclaré que j'étais folle. C'était une route où il y avait les rebelles, où personne ne pouvait passer. Parce que tu te disais, on va tirer sur moi. Et du coup, personne ne pouvait m'accompagner. C'était très dangereux. Donc je faisais une fois la route de Bujumbura-Kigali, une fois par semaine, pour aller approvisionner le pays. Et donc, je commençais à faire des négociations, à faire la pression pour que les médicaments arrivent chez nous. J'ai réuni les grands médecins, particulièrement les directeurs des hôpitaux. Je dis, j'aimerais que vous me souteniez. Et ça a été le cas. Et c'est comme ça que le Burundi a été le premier pays, malgré la guerre, malgré la crise, qui avait mis en place un fonds de solidarité thérapeutique. Je dis, bon, j'ai commencé, je n'ai pas droit de m'arrêter. En fait, à partir de ce moment, je n'ai plus arrêté.
Always wanted to have a baby, always. But at some point in '98, after I tested positive, I wasn't sure if it was something that could happen because then there wasn't a lot of information and you had conflicting things being said about, yes, you can have a baby or no. If you have a baby, your child will have AIDS and all of that. But later on, I realized that, the fact that I'm HIV positive does not mean that my child would have AIDS. Since I was a child, I wanted a child. I'd always known when I would get married. I knew the exact date. I knew I was going to get married on my father's 60th birthday. So I had the date, I had the dress, I had everything. I just didn't have the groom. So I had all those things planned. I was also sure that by the time I was 50, my last child would be 20, And I had planned out I'd get married. I had 2 children, all of that. But then I got married and none of that happened. So in 2006, I decided, really, I'm 36 this year. You think you're too old to have a child. I really do want to have this child. At some point, I had to ask myself, okay, so what if this child is HIV positive? What if? And I think the biggest fear I had then was I didn't think I'd forgive myself. I started medications at the end of the first trimester. And I took HIV medications for those 6 months. And I decided I wanted elective cesarean. I didn't want to take that risk. I've wanted this for the longest time. It's just a dream come true. I did all I knew to do to protect my child. And even though I'd done everything, I really was still scared. Will he be negative? Even though the medications gave me a 98-99% chance, there was still that 1% chance that something could go wrong. So nobody could promise me 100%.
We give the baby nevirapine, the dose of 2 milligrams per kg, immediately after birth. The use of all this is to prevent the mother-to-child transmission.
So I had access to medication. I had elective cesarean. I also chose not to breastfeed. And then my child also had access to HIV medications. So he was born HIV negative. I was in a position where I could decide to have a baby, where I had access to information so I knew exactly where to go, where everybody in the clinic knows me so I can walk in and get the best care. And I don't have to be apologetic about who and what I am. But that's not the average Nigerian. If we want to stop the trend of having over 740,000 children born with HIV every year, if Nigeria wants to reverse the trend of having over 204 babies born every day with HIV, then we have to go beyond healthcare settings. We have to go beyond the hospital. Our women are having babies with traditional birth attendants. They're having babies in churches. They're having babies with local midwives. And these are the people we need to reach if we're serious about this program working. It's not the symposium and the talk that will eliminate parent-to-child transmission. It's committing to go wherever the women are going.
Excuse me, I'm so sorry.
No, go ahead. That's okay.
My wife texting me.
Okay, that's okay. So it's been 3 years since you've had a test.
In 3 years.
Why have you not protected yourself better than that? I'm at the homeless shelter at least twice a month. I feed and I provide HIV testing. And I didn't go in preaching, I just go in teaching. I'm a woman living with HIV. I'm here testing today because I don't want you to be embarrassed or to be ashamed, because this is what I live with every day. This is my fight, my battle. And I disclose my status readily, and I do that because I find it puts people in more of a comfortable place. I want them to know that treatment works. And I don't ever want you to be ashamed. There's no reason to be. Look at me. I'm beautiful. I'm strong. I'm a contributor. I'm setting them up in case they do get a bad report. Then I've already laid the groundwork to where you're not alone, and then I'll get you the help you need.
Did I do it enough? I did it about 3 times. Is that enough, baby?
Thank you, T. Thank you, T. I know I'm providing a much-needed service. I'm available to listen. I take time. I don't rush them in. I don't rush them out.
I'm sorry.
Don't you dare apologize, sweetheart. Look, your struggle is your struggle. I make no judgment. You have 3 girls? I want you 3. Okay, well, I want you to take care of you. Okay? Mm-hmm. I want you to take care of you, but also I'm going to give you my number. Yes, ma'am. And I want you to stay in touch with me. Based on your reaction, that means that there are times you probably need somebody to talk to.
Because I can't talk to anyone in my family.
Well, guess what?
They all urging me to stay with my husband.
Can I tell you this? Sweetheart, look at me. The choices you make in life as to who you sleep with, who you want to live with, has to be yours. I don't live in your situation. I can't advise you on it. What I can advise you that as from one woman to another and a single mother, I'm divorced. Been in the ministry 49 years. I didn't let religion dictate my future. There were people in my family that thought I should have stayed with my husband. I thought I needed to stay mentally well, and I wanted to be healthy. All I'm going to say to you is love yourself enough so that you can stay sane, healthy, happy, and be the best that you can be for those girls.
Because they need somebody.
They need you, not just somebody. Your children need you, and that's important.
So you doing HIV testing today?
I've got some kits in the car.
You can do it?
If you want to do a test, I can do it.
I do.
Take 20 minutes?
I do.
Then I'll get a test for you.
I'm nervous. I haven't taken a test in a while. And because I'm scared of the outcome, I know the subject to change at any given moment with my lifestyle, so here we go.
The test is free. It's painless. All you're going to do is get a swab in the mouth. I'll give you this side of the paper, which tells you what HIV is. The treatment does help. Look at me.
Right.
It tells you that what to do if you think you have HIV. It tells you what to do if you test negative. It also tells you that you need to stay negative by using condoms and protecting yourself.
Right.
Have you had a test before?
Yes.
Okay, your test was negative? Okay, and I have to ask you these questions. Have you had sex with anybody who inject drugs?
I don't know.
Okay, have you had sex with a man who's had sex with other men?
Probably.
Yes, okay. Well, I mean, that's just being honest. Okay, have you injected drugs?
No.
And I'll give you this piece, and you'll take this and run it around the gums.
The nail?
Yes. Okay. It should be ready in about 20 minutes. No matter how much I trust God, I've got to show something to those people that are marginalized. That human side of me, and not that preaching side, but that side of me that actually goes beyond what that word is. The people who are marginalized don't believe in the system. They don't believe anybody cares. And I just want to reestablish, their faith in mankind. I think it would be important for you to get into the CABIT program, or one of the programs they're offering at the homeless shelter. That in itself puts you in line for shelter, to get you off the street.
I didn't know that.
Well, that's another reason I'm out here.
Right, thanks.
Because I do testing over here, and I've never seen you there.
No.
I cook hot food and bring it over here to the homeless shelter, and I haven't seen you. That concerns me. I'm going to talk to my sisters. I got 4, and we'll see what we can get together for you. Some things that will help you maybe manage the winter a little bit. Coats. You need a coat?
Yes, ma'am.
Gotcha.
I'd appreciate it.
And like I said, if you're willing to be a gatekeeper, whereas you can be giving out condoms or whatever when I bring them, or canned goods or clothes, if you can distribute that, then I'll do what I can.
Yes, ma'am.
I'll do that. And now I promise you, I will be back. I promise you, I'll be back. It won't be but a few more minutes.
Oh, no, I'm just nervous.
Your test is negative.
Oh, thank God. I don't have HIV. Oh, Jesus.
Okay, I'm trying to tell you quietly. You just told everybody.
Yeah, I had to tell everybody. It was scary, scary sight, baby. That's a scary thing. You don't know.
She told everybody.
Thank you. I feel like, I don't have HIV.
Amen.
Thank you so much.
It's all good.
When you say it's a human virus, can it be an animal?
This is the second camp we're having. It's a camp for adolescents, children aged 10 to 19 living with HIV. This year we have 40 kids in camp from 6 states.
What's the difference between ARV and ART?
There's a huge stigma. Kids here would be refused admission to some schools if they test HIV positive. A lot of private universities still insist on HIV, pre-admission HIV testing. A lot of private firms still do the pre-employment HIV testing. So there's a huge stigma in this country. Their friends don't know they have HIV. Not their friends at home, not their friends in school. A lot of their cousins don't even know they have HIV. So their HIV status is known by their parents or in the clinic. So we're dealing with children born with HIV, no other life. We had carried out a research to find out what's happening with adolescents, and we found out that the biggest problems they had was adhering to medication. They had been on drugs for so long, and they're tired. There's drug fatigue. We're losing children when they move from pediatric to adult clinic. That's another big problem. They were problem about this with disclosure. The parents didn't know when to tell them. And when do you tell a child, hello, you've got HIV? That was a big one for the parents. Then for the kids themselves, they had very little knowledge about sexual and reproductive health.
Where do you find herpes simplex 1? Where do we find herpes? What part of the body do you find simplex 1? What part of the body? Mouth. In the mouth. Thank you, Tiwa. Where do we find 2 usually? In the genital.
So that's what the camp set out to do, to understand sexuality, what's happening in my body, how a baby is made. Why do I adhere to my medication? What do I need to do to stay healthy?
If you're positive and your boyfriend or girlfriend is positive, do you still need to use a condom if you're both positive? Yes. Why? To avoid reinfection. And what else? Pregnancy, STIs, yes. So it doesn't matter if you're both. Thank you, so that you don't get a drug-resistant strain, right? Next slide.
We need to work with young people for them to negotiate safer sex. Some of them, like my kids, were born with HIV. But most young people who are getting infected in their teenage years are getting infected through sex. It's like 3-4 times higher amongst young girls and young boys. When they do, then it also means you have more likelihood of spreading HIV to your child and more babies born with HIV. We have to work to ensure that our young girls living with HIV do not have unintended pregnancies, that their pregnancies are planned. That way it will happen when they're ready, physically, mentally, emotionally. My big hope for the camp, very simplistic. Let the young people know that they're not alone. Just realize that there are other people like you. To me, that was big. Just knowing that you're not the only one is huge. And that was my plan for this, bond with other people your age. share experiences, and you can make a difference. Will they become advocates? Yes. Will they become leaders? I hope so. But my agenda is bond, making people realize you're not alone.
She did very well. Didn't she do well?
I feel like I just gave birth. I feel like I just had new babies. I'm as proud as a mother hen. It just feels so great to see young people who are willing to speak up and fight for themselves and for others and just be advocates. Even if just one child came out of that camp who was finally able to find his or her voice, it was worth it.
That has always been my dream, right from small, to help little children like me. But when I got to know about my status, I became strong-willed that children or adolescents like myself who can't get the treatment or the drugs, I must study hard so I can be successful and help them, because it's not their fault they are having the virus on them, and they need to fight the spread of the disease because it's killing a lot of people all over the world. So I think it's better if we come out from our shadows and fight.
In Africa, the infection rates amongst women hasn't gone down. In teenage girls, it's actually not 60%, it's 70% higher than that. And I think it's not just about getting access to medicines, it's about policies that make it worth being a woman. It's about policies that protect the lives of women, that invest in the health of women, that invest in the education of women, that supports and provides services, that doesn't criminalize the fact that I choose to take family control. That's why we have to not just work with them, but invest in women and girls. It's invest in their lives and in their future and in their dreams.
You hear me now? Yeah, it's quite difficult actually after watching this to speak. Thank you, Harriet. Amazing, powerful film. I think we're going to start now by the discussion part of this event. But before we start, I just want to acknowledge the amazing women that we saw, young women, older women, amazingly powerful leaders from all over the world who've been in this fight for a long time. I was very impressed by the knowledge level of the adolescents. I bet you if we asked the question, maybe some of us in this room won't know the answer, but that was very impressive. Do we have Lillian?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. So I'm going to start by providing a very brief introduction to our three panelists today, discussants today. They have very, very extensive bios and amazing accomplishments, but I'm going to try to be brief so we can start the questions and open it up to you, all of you. So let me start first by Harriet, introducing Harriet Hirshhorn. She is the person who directed this amazing work that you just saw. And she's a documentary filmmaker whose award-winning documentaries focus on social justice issues. She's closely followed the HIV epidemic since its earliest days in Africa. She's made many documentaries. She's also filmed AIDS activists from around the world in many countries, particularly in Africa. She's also made several short films over the years and actually had a video installation in the Pompidou Center in Paris in 2005. In addition, she's also made some documentary films about the struggle for democracy and human rights in Haiti. So as you can see, she's an amazingly accomplished person. She's a Ford Foundation grant recipient and also has received an artist fellowship from the New York Foundation for the Arts. Welcome, Harriet. Thank you for being with us. Okay, let me then introduce our second discussant today, and that's Terry McGovern, I think known to many of you in the room. Welcome back, Terry, to Mailman. So Terry McGovern currently is the Senior Associate Dean for Academic and Student Affairs in the City University of New York, CUNY Graduate School of Public Health and Health Policy. Terry, you saw her in action in the film, a few years younger. She's an expert human rights lawyer and advocate and academic who is internationally recognized for her work in health and human rights, sexual reproductive rights and health, gender justice and environmental justice. And she was previously here at Mailman as the chair of the Population and Family Health Department and also the director of the Global Health Justice and Governance program here at Mailman. So she's a familiar face to many of us here at the school. As you probably deduced from the film, in 1989, she founded the HIV Law Project and was its executive director for a decade. And she successfully litigated numerous cases against the federal, state, and local governments, including SP versus Sullivan, which forced the Social Security Administration to expand HIV-related criteria and therefore to enable women to gain access to benefits, women living with HIV to gain access to benefits. She's also an accomplished scholar as well and has done research on health and human rights, sexual reproductive rights, and adolescent health. And she is also serves as well as a member of the Council on Foreign Relations and the board of the NYCLU. Okay, and then with us, Lillian. Welcome, Lillian, who's online with us. And Lillian Mrueka, she is joining us from South Africa, where she's actually attending an ICAP supported program. They are taking place this week. And this is an important meeting to launch a very important new project that's focused on addressing vertical transmission of HIV from mother to child in Africa. This is a Gates-funded project called Hive, and it's led by our very own Elaine Abrams. So it's very nice to have you, Lillian, in South Africa at the meeting, and I'll see you on Saturday, I think, because I'll be going there to join them. So Lillian currently serves as the executive director and founding member of the International Committee of Women Living with HIV in Eastern Africa. And she's been a champion and advocate for gender and human rights, universal access to HIV and TB prevention treatment, expanded sexual reproductive health choices. And she's really worked very hard to empower women and girls throughout her career. She's also served as well as a member, a founding member of the Uganda Network of AIDS Services Organization and the National Forum of People Living with HIV in Uganda. She's also, for her unwavering commitment to addressing AIDS, she's received numerous honors, including the Courageous Changemaker Award and the Uganda HIV/AIDS Leadership Award. Welcome, Lillian. Great. So after this brief introduction, I'll start maybe the conversation with here in the room and then bring you in as well, Lillian. So let me start with you, Harriet. And can you tell us briefly, how did this remarkable documentary come about? What motivated you to do this, and how did it happen?
It was a long time coming. I was traveling with Marie de Sannival, who has become my spouse, but at the time she wasn't. And she was looking at the economics of access to treatment, basically, for a researcher in France. And I was accompanying her. And everywhere we went to Botswana, we went to Burundi, and we went to South Africa. We saw many, many organizations of people living with HIV, and they were all being led by women. And yet I had never read about this anywhere. I had never seen any images of this. And I was shocked. I mean, it was just sort of like staring me in the face. A lot of the women who were leading these organizations were widows. They had lost their husbands to AIDS, and they were now, doing everything they could to support access to treatment in their own countries for everybody, basically. And so that's basically how it started. I was so the first time that I met Jean Gapia in Burundi, I just turned the camera on and I started asking her questions, and she explained what was going on at the ANSS and how their support groups worked and stuff like that. And then much later on, when Terry McGovern was at the Ford Foundation, there was an application process, and we talked a lot about enlarging widening the lens a little bit, and to include, what was going on here in the U.S. With women many years later. Mm-hmm. So we sort of widened the scope, and yeah.
And here we are. Thank you. Thank you. And Terry, I'm just, when I saw you on the screen, and of course I know you for many, many years, but I saw the passion there and the determination. But how does one take on the federal government? That's kind of not easy. So first of all, why did you decide to take this, the lawsuit, and why do you think it was successful?
First of all, thank you, WAFA, for convening us, and thank you, my activists, I guess I'd call us, on the panel, and thank you all for coming out. I have to say that, it is still painful to watch these clips, but to see, I was a legal services lawyer in 1987, and just to see these people, women coming in who were, grappling with finding out that their children had HIV, then they were, very, very sick, unable to qualify for Medicaid, and they would lose their apartments, and they would lose their children. Then we would be litigating their right to see their children, because often termination of parental rights was instigated. So what I was seeing was absolutely unbelievably horrible. So, and the women, just as you saw in Harriet's wonderful documentary, were so incredible and helping each other, and, mostly consumed with concern for their kids. So, and my partners in trying to figure out what was happening came from kind of three different directions. One was the doctors who were in the health and HHC hospitals, Harlem Hospital, Bellevue. I know a lot of the folks that are doing this work still from those early years where they said there's something wrong. We can't, the M11Q, which was the form that got you benefits, they're not meeting, they're not qualifying. So there were doctors. Then we realized we need public health people to document what was happening, which is where I began my association with mailmen and public health. But it was also the ones who had named it were the women who were at Bedford Hills and in California, incarcerated all around the country. So they were the ones who were spotting it and saying there's something wrong. So it was all of these different kind of folks coming together, but also, frankly, journalists, women of color who were willing to cover these issues, who were willing to follow us around and see what was happening. So it felt like it was so clear that this was such extreme discrimination, and it needed to happen. So I guess I was still young. I was in my 20s, so I didn't think about suing the federal government. But it was because we had so much support I think it was successful, but also because we invested a lot in making sure that the plaintiffs, the women, understood what was happening to them, that it wasn't their fault that they were denied all these things and losing their children, and actually turning on the lights about what we now call structural racism and sexism, saying these policies are causing this in your life, really was transformative for them. And because they were transformed, they were incredibly powerful leaders, and had a big impact in the media, in shifting culture. So lots of different factors there, but I think, particularly important in this moment, the courage and the decency that I saw in these women really compelled action.
And you can see it in the film as well. And I think the impact was so profound on people's lives. I think we'll come back to this when we talk about the current moment and the issues that women are facing in this country and elsewhere. But Lillian, I'm wondering, from where you sit in South Africa or in Uganda, I know that there, over the past decade, there have been remarkable progress in really confronting HIV epidemic around the world, including for women. But from your perspective, what are the biggest barriers that remain in terms of getting women the recognition, the services that they need?
Thank you very much, Wafa, and Harriet, thank you very much for this. It is really, really important, and it makes us go back to see where we've come from and where we are. But it is also interesting that when you watch the documentary, indeed, you realize that, first of all, there has been lots of progress, and that's why some of us are even here and able to speak to the audience. But it is also important to note that there doesn't seem to be much that has changed. When I saw colleagues, when I saw Terry, when I saw Daison, when I saw Lorake and other women, and the issues that they were raising and the energy, I could still see the same. That we've moved so much, but we are still almost at the same level. And Harriet, in your introduction, when you talk about what prepared you to do this documentary or to write this, it is still the same. And I was feeling angry again as an activist that women have done so much, they continue to do so much, and today in 2024, it is still the same story, that we have a face of a woman leading the HIV response in all and at all levels from the community. Talk about carers, they are women. Talk about who is preventing mother-to-child transmission, they are women. Who is working around prevention, they are women. But then when you ask, how are they doing it? Do they have the tools? Do they have the resources? Nothing. It is still the same situation. So for me, it takes me back to say, what is wrong? What has gone wrong that we still have to go through the same situation, the same era? But Wafa, to your question, like again, the questions are still the same. Talk about sexual reproductive health and rights. Lorake talked about disclosure. We are still having issues around disclosure as an issue, and the issue that she mentioned. And now disclosure is a big issue in a way that time we didn't have so many laws and policies, and the legal environment was not as harsh as it is now. But now, in most parts of the world, the legal environment is harsh. Stigma and discrimination is still high. Criminalization of people living with HIV, key and vulnerable population, is just up there. And therefore, we cannot even be talking about disclosure. it is a big issue, because how do we encourage people to disclose when they are going to be criminalized, when they are going to be stigmatized? And what is it that we are saying? We are talking about disclosure now when we have young people who are born with HIV, and now they are growing as adolescents, they are growing as adults. And the only thing we are telling them is disclose. But where do they disclose from? What is the environment like? That is another issue. Another issue that is very, very critical is that we are getting into a situation where we have limited resources. The resources are getting down. And thank you, Terry, for supporting Harriet and the team. But also, I know when you were at Ford Foundation, you did a lot of work supporting women organizations. There are not so many funders, there are not so many institutions that support organizations of women, even when they know they do a lot of work. So at a situation where we are in terms of resources dwindling down, it becomes even clearer and more challenging for women to access resources. And therefore, they have to work with limited resources, with no tools, no resources, just because there's a lot of competition. And Harriet mentioned that they wrote an application, but I'm sure that application was written. There were so many other applications that were written. But you realize that the women you're talking about, the women in Burundi, the women in Nigeria that are featuring in the film, don't have the capacity, they don't have what it takes to write comparing proposals and applications and compete with other organizations. And therefore, they remain at a level where they continue to do the work with less or with nothing. And yet, we are saying that it is women who are going to end AIDS. And therefore, the issues are still the same, Wafa. They have not changed. I think what has changed is that now we are more aware about these issues. We see them, we go through them, we challenge them, we have more women activists, we have more advocates to challenge some of these situations, but it is hard to break through, especially in the region where I come from.
Thank you very much, Lillian. And I think you're right about that. Many of the women leaders of these small organizations, they struggle, as you said, because of the resources and the constraints. Going back to you, Terry, and this is something that Lillian touched on, is we're seeing almost like a regression, shall we say, in terms of some of the legal protections, both in terms of what we're seeing in overseas in criminalizing certain behaviors in certain countries, many countries around the world, but also in terms of kind of erosion of commitment to sexual reproductive health rights in this country and so on. So can you share with us how you think about these and what's the way forward here? Or we have young people in this audience, we need to get them all mobilized. And
so, you know, I think we all know that progress is not, you know, straightforward, but, you know, look, when I started, Reagan was president, you know, there was an absolute refusal to invest in research on HIV. In my lifetime, I saw just at the moment where the global north companies extended patent protection, activists pushed through exceptions. In South Africa, they used the right to health to demand treatment, first mother to child, to prevent vertical transmission. But, you know, we have seen the impossible in the course of this epidemic. We have seen the impossible. All of the problems that Lillian referred to remain and are huge. But one thing that I really was taught by the women that I worked with early on was you fight, you fight, you fight, you fight in creative ways. You bring in all different types of players. So talking about this country for a moment and what's happening in the states where abortions are banned, it is, of course, again, doctors, nurses, providers, community groups. You see this same level of commitment, energy, organizing happening. Don't be confused. It's happening all over this country. So we have to fight. We have to fight smart, in a very smart way. We have to do, again, what we learned in early HIV. We need directly affected people to lead. Those of us who have certain skills, we can share them and use them, doctors, lawyers, but we actually need to really, let the directly affected people lead and work across sectors. I don't think that it's a good time to give up on anything. And I don't think we would have had any of the victories we have had in HIV, but also in public health without creative advocacy that embodies all types of people, all different sectors. So I think we look back to our history, and the same way it was absolutely unacceptable that this was happening to people, to women. That is absolutely true in all of these areas that we're seeing today, and we can't allow it to go on. I do want to say one other thing. The woman problem, it never goes away. Unless you raise it and you're a woman and you have some power, unless you use your power to make sure that these issues are addressed, are talked about, to make sure that other women also get to share power. Unless we all start to do that, it's never going to change. And of course, all of this is laced with racism, sexism, all kinds of isms. So those of us who have power, we need to use it effectively and never, ever be afraid to talk about the fact that women actually need to be in positions of leadership. So I think we don't say that enough. And in the current environment around the world, gender-based violence is going up. It's like a free fall around these issues. So I think we need to name them and have the courage to do so.
Yeah, thank you. And I think you certainly can be sure there are fighters in this room and on this and virtually online that never give up. Going back to you, Harriet, can you share with us, you're an artist, you're a documentary filmmaker. How do you see the contributions, the role of art in whatever form in shining a light on important issues like HIV epidemic and so on?
That's a huge question. I would say that, for example, this film is having an interesting life. It's being shown a lot in migrant communities, and women in those communities feel very empowered by this film, and that to me is sort of a dream come true, because it's kind of hard to put into words, but for some people, seeing themselves represented in this way is extremely freeing, and gives them the space to talk about something where, I'll speak very specifically. There's a migrant community in Marseille that's a lot of Francophone African women, and many of them are living with HIV and they've never talked about it before. And having a screening just for them, where there were basically no outside French people in the room, was just an amazing, they only told me about it. I wasn't there either. But I guess that's the answer to your question, which is that if a film can tell stories in such a way as to make others have some kind of peace or comfort, or also have some kind of desire to actually do something, I think that's what I would like.
And you're right. Certainly one can find this in watching a documentary film, or reading a book or a poem, or looking at a painting or a sculpture. So, I find that it's true that art can transcend many, many other approaches. Let's go back to you, Lillian, just for a quick question and answer, because I want to take some questions from the audience here. But, you know, the connection between, and you're at the Hive meeting now in South Africa, obviously the connection of the importance of mother vertical transmission of HIV and the global effort to eliminate vertical transmission. You know, can you tell us, give us a sense on where do you see that, what's needed now in order to get that last mile to accomplish the elimination?
Yeah, thank you very much. But before I answer your question, I really wanted to applaud again the film that you see one of the challenges that we are having now, especially with young people, is that they did not see what we saw. For some of us, it was life and death. We were fighting for our lives when we got into doing this work. When I started doing this work, when I learned about my status, I was about 24. And in that room, like you said, there are young people who are probably the age of my age when I learned about my HIV status. So watching this film for me is very, very important, that it reminds people who did not see people dying, who did not see the situation that is portrayed in this film, and it helps to ignite the energy that Terry is talking about, that we need to really work together. We need to work hard to make sure that we are able to end AIDS, not even in 2030, but to make sure that we end AIDS. So for me, this is a very, very important tool that needs to be seen and watched by everybody. And of course, for example, it is important and critical for me now that we are talking about prevention, where we even have tools that are available, but they are not accessible to majority of young people, probably including young people in that room. And therefore, for me, this is one of the tools that we can use to rally more advocates, champions, especially bring on board young people to join us so that we are able to fight together. So having said that, we can only end AIDS by 2030 if we invest more. We can only end AIDS by 2030 if we address issues of young people, young children, if we address issues of adolescent girls and young women. In Africa, for example, where I am, where majority of them are still getting newly infected with HIV, when we have prevention tools in place. During my time, one could understand and we could forgive anybody. We could forgive our countries. We could forgive the international community because there was limited tools for us to use to prevent HIV. But in this generation, in 2024, when we are even having all these tools, we have the pivoting vaginal ring, we have now the cabotegravir, we have condoms, now we are getting the LEN, all these are coming up, but we don't see the, like the urgency that is needed to get these tools in the hands of young people. And therefore, if we must talk about this, we must talk about ensuring that adolescent girls and young women, young people, men and women, wherever they are, they have access to prevention tools. Because when you prevent, it means you're going to have children who are HIV negative. And when we have children who are HIV negative, then we are contributing to ending AIDS in children, but we are also contributing to ending AIDS globally. So I think for me, we must invest in prevention. We must invest in sexual reproductive health and rights, because that is very, very critical. We must invest in ending gender-based violence, which is one of the areas that contributes to HIV. And lastly, but not least, we must make sure that children, those especially who are HIV positive, have access to treatment, because treatment is there, and therefore they need to get that. But all this is going to happen if we engage women, if we engage carers. Because, for example, children who are not on treatment is not that they are with us, they are with their mothers, they are with their carers. But how come they are not accessing treatment? How come they are not bringing them? So we must address issues of women and girls, and we must make sure that women and girls are engaged meaningfully.
Thank you. Thank you. Excellent. Thank you. We have time for a couple of questions from the audience. So just raise your hand and comments, questions, or... Okay. Yes, please. Microphone. And if you can be brief, so we can get a brief answer and maybe another question as well.
Okay, yeah, sure. My question actually is kind of more around the progression of clinical trials and women in HIV clinical trials. Specifically how clinical trials are modeled. I think in a way, like I feel like there still isn't like that modeling to accommodate women. And I guess if you have any experience or like have any type of like understanding of like clinical trials, like what do you see that they can do better to accommodate women in clinical trials? Because I still don't see that happening.
Thank you. I mean,
I'll say, I'd like you to answer it too, because, but just to say, so quite apart from the Social Security discrimination, I had all these women coming in who were denied access to clinical trials. I'm talking about early, because there was an FDA guideline that women of childbearing potential could be excluded from the early phases of clinical trials, which we went after and got knocked out. But so there was, because of thalidomide, all of this kind of rules about what if they're pregnant, et cetera. And so we had to sort out that mess. I think we then got, it's interesting, NIH, we got guidelines that said you had to include certain amounts of people. This is all due to advocacy. Just to go back to the moment we're in, all of these things happen because of advocacy. So the NIH put out guidelines. There are still lots of issues, and I'll turn to you, Wafa, on this, but to the extent that we've made progress, it's only because of advocacy, so I think it needs to continue.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in essence also, you always have to think about how do we really, from the beginning, create clinical trials that are appropriate for women, and where women themselves are involved in the design and the shaping of these trials. And that's very important. So you have to engage people way up front here and not just create a study and then hope that they enroll in it. So getting people involved from day one in terms of shaping the trials themselves. And then I think importantly is, where are you doing the trials? You have to do them in the community. I always say you have to take the services to where the people are at, not expect them to come to you. And then very importantly is to have all the facilitators that enable women to participate. They get the information, the appropriate information, important supportive services and so on, so they can actually engage. I mean, we've come a long way, but I think there's obviously more that needs to be done. Quick, one more question. Yes. Lillian?
Can I add to say that, as Terry says, it is about advocacy, and one of the achievements now that we are having is that we have advocated to ensure that pregnant women get involved in clinical trials. But also one of the things that we have done as advocates and activists is to push the research community to make sure that they have community advisory boards. For example, one of the clinical trials, the ECHO trial, which was looking at Depo-Provera, we made sure that there was a global community of women living, of women who are advising from within the trial. And this has been taken up by many. For example, Gilead has picked it up. VIV has picked it up, and we think if we continue advocating, all researchers and like people who are doing trials are going to take it up. So join us so that we advocate for more engagement of communities within the trials themselves, so that they can push from within and from the table.
Thank you very much, Lillian. Very important. I think one more quick question. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Hello.
Yes. Yeah. So I think
one of the main things that was discussed was how to bring people with lived experience to be part and parcel of the decision making. So my question is to Lillian. Can you speak on how your organization has tried to hold the governments in the different countries in in the East African region more accountable in having people with lived experience in the decision making and strategy development, etc.
Yeah, so thank you very much. And in the interest of time, I'll just speak about one, is that one of the areas that we have advocated for example, in Uganda, where we are located, is that we've challenged our government to make sure that they take up and scale up the investment, but also ensuring that prevention is high on the agenda. And we challenged the National Drug Authority, we challenged the Minister of Health, and we asked, one, Uganda is one of the countries that is having high HIV infections among adolescent girls and young women. And we know that the prevailing vaginal ring has been approved by WHO, and therefore it can be one of the options that young women and girls can have access to. It was a long process, but finally they accepted and it was approved as one of the prevention tools. And as we speak right now, also we engaged with the Global Fund, and they have put resources to make sure that they are able to procure the prevailing vaginal ring. And therefore, we know that now there are some young women and girls who are not probably able to use other options and choices, but prefer this one. So that is one of them that I can give. But we challenge at global, regional, and at all levels. We don't sit down. We don't wait, because we know we can never get what we need on a silver platter. So we have to push and advocate. And with people like Terry and Wafa and everybody, especially who give us a platform, like where I am right now, I'm going to be speaking on behalf of women, pushing the agenda for why it is important for women living with HIV to be at the table when we talk about ending AIDS in children.
Thank you very much, Lillian. Unfortunately, we don't have any more time, but at the end, I want to just thank you all for being here. I also want to acknowledge the men in the audience. So I think I always say that, you know, they've been very, very notable male champions in the HIV response who've been partners with many women in the struggle. So I think we acknowledge the women leaders, the women researchers, and the women programmers and policymakers, but also the men who champion their leadership. So thank you all for being here today. And thank you to Terry, to Harriet, and to you, Lillian. And thanks to all the audience online. It's been great to have you and to celebrate together another World AIDS Day. Thank you.
Thank you, Wafa.
Oh, we have one slide to share.
The full video will be available to you. And we'll just put the QR code up here. Just to be aware, there is a password, ICAP 2024. So you can scan the QR code and you can see the full video.
And it's wonderful. Yeah, I highly recommend that you watch the whole documentary. It's really wonderful.
In this cut, they didn't include the funny parts. So you should really watch the comedy.
Great. Thank you all. Thank you for being here, and thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you, Tina. Thanks.
Let me.
So, since I don't know why the video audio wasn't working,